The story opens in a world that feels both familiar and foreign, a landscape shaped not by softness, petals, or perfume, but by the tall shadows of ancient plants that have never once imagined a bloom. The early Mesozoic is a chapter of Earth's history where green does not yet sparkle, it simply stands. Towering conifers stretch their needled limbs across dry winds. Cycades rise like armored shrubs, their stiff fronds spreading outward in symmetrical rings. Ferns blanket the forest floor in layers of lacy fronds, catching droplets of light that slip through the conifer canopy. It is a quiet, sturdy world, uncomplicated by the later evolutionary inventions of seduction and sweetness. Before we settle into the quiet, fascinating world of bees, take a gentle moment to like and subscribe to the Late Night Scientist channel, and tell me in the comments when and where you're listening, so this calm science can reach more sleepy listeners drifting off tonight. Now, let's continue this sleepy journey. But beneath this green architecture, an entire cast of early insects scurries, flits, and whirs, each one busy, each one thoroughly unaware that in a few million years, their descendants will become partners in one of nature's most intricate relationships. For now, though, pollination is a rather accidental affair. Plants release clouds of yellowish dust, pollen, into the air, trusting the wind to scatter their hopes across the forest, like fine powder searching for somewhere compatible to land. It is a strategy that works reasonably well, provided one has no expectations of efficiency. If plants of the era had diaries, they would likely include phrases such as, "Another day, another breeze, fingers crossed." The insects that roam these forests have entirely different priorities. Primitive beetles carve slow arcs across the bark of ancient gymnosperms. Dragonflies skim over swamps with wings that shimmer like hammered metal. Small wasp-like creatures hunt, lay eggs, and repeat their cycles with a kind of crisp determination that does not include flower visitation, because flowers, so far, simply do not exist. Life is busy, but no one is carrying pollen on purpose yet. It is a world defined by stillness and endurance. Without flowers, there is no soft choreography of petals unfolding at dawn. There are no colors designed to entice wandering eyes, no fragrances engineered to whisper promises of sweetness. The air holds only the scents of resin, spore, and damp earth. A forest walk, if we had feet and the freedom to stroll, would feel solemn, like visiting a cathedral built by time. Every tree is tall, straight, and singularly focused on its own quiet survival. Yet beneath this calm exterior, pressures are beginning to shift. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Earth rarely rushes, but subtly, like the slow turning of a page. The climate warms and cools in cycles that stretch longer than human civilizations will someday last. New landmasses collide, drift, and tear apart. These changes affect everything: the pathways of rivers, the openness of grasslands, the density of forests, and the kinds of life that can thrive in each place. Some gymnosperms begin to push into new territories, while others retreat. Ferns dominate humid zones but falter in drier climates. Through these shifts, plants find themselves confronting an ecological challenge. Wind, though tireless, is not an especially loyal messenger. It scatters pollen everywhere, on rocks, in streams, onto the unsuspecting back of an ancient beetle who would much prefer not to be involved. But none of this is targeted. Wind is enthusiastic but indiscriminate, like tossing letters into the void and hoping one finds its destination. This inefficiency creates open evolutionary space, a kind of vacancy sign in the ecosystem that no organism yet knows how to read. A strategy awaits invention, a system where pollen moves not by chance, but by partnership. But for now, the vacancy remains just that, an unfilled role quietly influencing the future. If we pause here and observe the landscape long enough, we might sense that something is missing. Not because we expect flowers, but because we, with the luxury of hindsight, know flowers will come. We know that color, sweetness, and intricate coevolution lie ahead. But in this chapter of Earth's biography, nothing anticipates those innovations. The world is content with its current palette of deep greens and resin-scented breezes. Still, life has a way of preparing the stage long before actors arrive. Insects develop new mouthparts suited for biting, chewing, or piercing, tools that much later will prove surprisingly adaptable for flower feeding. Early wasp-like ancestors perfect their agility, navigating forests with increasingly precise control over flight. Their small bodies pick up dust and debris along the way, not deliberately, but because physics insists that anything fuzzy or ridged will collect particles. These ancestral insects are not pollinators, but they are carrying the biological scaffolding from which pollination will someday emerge. And as the Mesozoic continues to unfold, plants become subtly more experimental. Some produce pollen with textures that cling slightly better. Some create cones spaced differently, catching wind currents in new ways. Evolution never stops tinkering. Every minor adjustment is a small note added to a grand score that has not yet reached its most poetic movements. Nothing here looks like the beginning of bees, and yet, everything is quietly setting the stage for them. The forests stand in their still, ancient grandeur. The wind continues its tireless, imprecise work. Insects continue their daily routines, unaware that a few curious ancestors will someday wander toward sweetness and change the story of Earth forever. In time, flowers will bloom. But for now, the world is waiting, green, windswept, and full of potential. If Chapter 1 unfolded in a world painted with sturdy strokes of green, then Chapter 2 is when nature quietly picks up an entirely new palette. The arrival of flowering plants, angiosperms, marks a shift so gentle and yet so transformative that the planet almost seems to inhale new air. These early flowers are not the vibrant spectacles we know today. At first, they are modest, experimental structures, petals arranged in uncertain patterns, colors muted like shy artists testing their paints. But they are unmistakably something new. Organisms designed not just to exist, but to communicate. Before flowers, plants played a solitary game, relying on wind or water to carry their genetic messages. Angiosperms, however, take a brave and rather theatrical step. They attempt to speak. They begin with color. Soft yellows, pale greens, faint purples, early attempts at visual persuasion. These hues are not meant for beauty, though beauty will one day be a happy side effect. They are signals, crafted for eyes that are slowly evolving to see them. Even at this early stage, flowers operate like quiet entrepreneurs, offering subtle incentives to any creature willing to visit. Flowers are not being generous, they are negotiating. And negotiation requires more than color. Scent arrives as one of the earliest evolutionary innovations, drifting through humid air in faint chemical curls. These scents vary widely, some sweet, others musky, some carrying notes that modern noses would politely describe as challenging. But in the Mesozoic, these molecules are not perfumery, they are announcements. A flower's fragrance is a coded message, released into the air to declare, "I have resources. Approach if interested." The world begins to hum with opportunity. Early insects, still unaware of their future as pollination specialists, encounter these scented colors with curiosity. Some arrive simply because flowers resemble safe landing platforms. Others seek moisture or shelter. Most are simply wandering, yet their wandering provides flowers with the chance to test a revolutionary idea: that reproduction can be guided, not guessed. Picture an early angiosperm perched between the roots of towering conifers. Its petals spread open in the afternoon light, trembling slightly as a primitive beetle crawls over them. The flower does not know the beetle's intentions. The beetle does not know the flower's hopes. And yet, pollen grains shift, cling, and travel from one bloom to another. The first successful pollination events between flowers and insects likely felt accidental, life bumping into life. But evolution is a patient accountant. What works gets recorded, refined, and repeated. Colors deepen, petals widen, scents become bolder, drifting farther on warm breezes. Nectar evolves, an energy-rich liquid, created not as a gift, but as a strategic investment. Angiosperms do not give without expectation. Their sugary offering is a contract. Take this, and in return, carry something for me. It is, in its own way, the earliest ecological trade agreement. And as flowers diversify, the world transforms visually. Forests that once stood in uniform greens begin to shimmer with new textures. Small, scattered patches of color appear like humble lanterns across the landscape. Over millions of years, these lanterns grow brighter, multiplying in shape and structure. Valleys start to hold soft carpets of blooms. Hillsides glow in muted tones. Wetlands ripple with delicate petals that open and close like slow breaths. This shift is not merely aesthetic. It ripples through entire ecosystems. Plant reproduction becomes more efficient, allowing angiosperms to spread into new habitats. Where wind-pollinated plants once dominated, these innovators take root with surprising speed. Their seeds, enclosed in protective fruits, travel farther than spores or cones ever could. Fruits themselves become a new form of invitation, an edible reward for animals willing to disperse seeds. The negotiation expands beyond insects, reaching reptiles, mammals, and even the wind itself. now recruited as just one of several delivery methods. As flowering plants prosper, they alter the very rhythm of landscapes. Growing seasons shift. Soil changes beneath them. Plant communities reorganize into more complex patterns. Layers of ground flowers, mid-height shrubs, and blooming canopy trees. These new habitats attract new creatures, each of whom brings fresh ecological pressures and possibilities. It is as though angiosperms, by inventing petals, have inadvertently orchestrated the rise of entire new ecosystems. The air, too, changes, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Fragrance accumulates in the warm seasons, creating faint, sweet pockets in forests and meadows. Colors appear in gradients, drawing wandering insects without any conscious decision on their part. If we could stand in this early flowering world, we might notice how movement begins to feel more purposeful. Insects drawn by scent trails, small animals returning to favored fruiting shrubs, breezes carrying pollen that no longer needs to depend entirely on luck. This chapter is a quiet revolution, no abrupt takeover, no loud flourish, but a steady transformation that will eventually shape nearly every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth. Flowers invent not just beauty, but strategy. They become advertisers, negotiators, biochemists, and architects of interdependence. And though bees have not yet entered the story, their future is already being written in these colorful negotiations. The world that awaits them will be bright, fragrant, and full of opportunity. Flowers, in their earnest attempts to improve reproductive success, have prepared a banquet for a lineage of insects that does not yet exist. But soon, very soon in geological terms, some wandering wasps with a taste for sweetness will stumble into this blooming experiment, and the world will change again. By the time flowers have confidently unfurled their colors across the continents, something interesting begins happening among the insects that hover, wander, and stalk through this blooming landscape. Among them are the early wasps, sleek, sharp-jawed predators who up until now have lived their lives with a certain martial focus. Their days are spent hunting small arthropods, provisioning nests, and defending territory with an intensity that suggests the world has assigned them a serious job and they intend to uphold its expectations. But evolution has a way of nudging even the sternest creatures toward unexpected hobbies. And for these ancient wasps, that hobby begins with a simple curiosity: the taste of nectar. It is difficult to pinpoint the exact moment a predatory wasp decided that chasing prey was less appealing than sipping sugar, but we can imagine the scene. Perhaps a wasp lands on a primitive flower while pursuing a fleeing insect and accidentally brushes against a droplet of nectar. Or perhaps it pauses to rest on a bloom, its wings tired, its mandibles sticky with the remnants of a successful hunt, and happens to discover the sweetness waiting inside. Whatever the initial spark, the effect is immediate. The nectar is rich, easy to access, and reassuringly non-violent. Compared to wrestling with armored beetles or evasive flies, this feels almost luxurious. At first, the wasp's visits are opportunistic. These creatures are not interested in helping flowers pollinate. They are interested in free carbohydrates. They return because the energy reward is efficient, far more so than pursuing prey that can hide, fight back, or simply fly away at the worst possible moment. Nectar, by contrast, politely stays where it is. To a wasp's evolutionary logic, this is almost suspiciously convenient. Still, convenience wins, and as these visits become more common, something subtle and transformative occurs. Pollen, produced in vast quantities by eager flowers, clings to the irregular surfaces of the wasp's exoskeleton. It collects between segments, clings to the fine hairs along its legs, settles onto its face and thorax. When the wasp flies to another flower, some of that pollen brushes off, completing a reproductive step that would otherwise rely on wind or chance. The wasp has no idea it has become a courier, but evolution pays attention, even when the participants do not. Over time, certain wasps begin to specialize, not consciously, but gradually, through generations of tiny advantages. Individuals who are slightly better at accessing nectar, or slightly more tolerant of spending time among petals, gain a small, energetic edge. That edge influences survival, reproduction, and the traits passed onward. Mandibles soften. Legs develop features more suited to grasping rather than piercing. Behavior shifts from strict predation to a flexible blend of hunting and gathering. This is where the story quietly pivots. The predators, whose ancestors mastered the art of pursuit, begin to invest in gentler strategies. Hunting doesn't vanish, but harvesting begins to take up more ecological space. In the background of this shift, the world continues changing. Flowers expand their range, offering consistent, renewable nectar supplies. Competition for prey fluctuates as new insect lineages appear. The climate oscillates, occasionally favoring creatures that can diversify their diets. Within this dynamic world, a lineage of wasps begins to settle into a new role. Their larvae, once fed exclusively on captured prey, start receiving mixtures of pollen and nectar. It is nutritious, abundant, and, importantly, doesn't fight back. This dietary transition marks one of the earliest steps toward true bees, as pollen becomes a staple food source rather than an incidental contaminant. The structure of these wasps' bodies shifts to support a harvesting lifestyle. Their hair becomes denser, not for warmth, but to trap more pollen. Their flight patterns evolve into calm, looping searches rather than tense, predatory zigzags. This transformation is never swift. It is a story written in millions of small edits, each one made by environmental pressures and tiny reproductive chances. But generation by generation, a new creature emerges. No longer a wasp who occasionally visits flowers, but an insect whose life begins to revolve around them. It is worth pausing here to appreciate the elegance of this evolutionary detour. No flower sent out a formal request for pollinators. No wasp attended a meeting where nectar for pollen trade agreements were drafted. Evolution didn't plan this partnership. It just noticed it worked. Once the system began functioning, it refined itself with enthusiasm. The earliest proto-bees are still leaner and more wasp-like than their modern descendants. Their bodies are built for agility, not yet the rotund softness we associate with bees today. Their nests remain simple burrows or borrowed cavities. They do not yet craft wax or organize themselves socially, but they are deeply committed to the blooming world around them, returning to flowers not for a casual taste, but for survival. As angiosperms continue to diversify, these proto-bees diversify in kind. Some show early preferences for particular flower types, small hints of specialization that will one day shape entire evolutionary branches. Others remain generalists, drifting from bloom to bloom with carefree flexibility. Their world becomes a mosaic of colors, scents, and opportunities, each one shaping their future. Predation does not vanish entirely. Old habits linger. But the center of gravity has shifted. Where once the wasp ancestors lived at the edge of constant conflict, these new bees inhabit a landscape of mutual benefit, one where energy flows through sweetness rather than struggle. This chapter marks the moment when two worlds, flowers and insects, begin intertwining in earnest. The hunters discover harvesting. The nectar drinkers become accidental pollinators. And evolution quietly sets the stage for a lineage that will someday alter entire ecosystems. The first bees do not yet know what they are becoming, but the flowers have noticed, and the world is beginning to bloom with purpose. If the earliest proto-bees still carried the lean, polished look of their wasp ancestors, evolution soon had other plans. What begins as a small advantage, an extra bit of texture on an exoskeleton, becomes the defining feature of an entirely new kind of insect. No one intends to become fuzzy, least of all a creature descended from predators. But biology is not concerned with aesthetics. It simply follows whatever works, and fuzz works astonishingly well. In the blooming landscapes of the early angiosperm world, pollen has become a resource worth pursuing. Pollen grains are nutritious, but inconveniently small, prone to slipping away at the slightest movement. To harvest enough of them, an insect needs a surface upon which these microscopic spheres can cling. Smooth exoskeletons, while excellent for speed and defense, are terrible at this task. Pollen slides right off, like dust from polished stone. But body hair changes everything. At first, these hairs are sparse, tiny bristles scattered across the legs and thorax of early bee ancestors. They are not meant for pollen. They are simply part of the wasp inheritance. Yet once flowering plants enter the scene, these bristles gain new significance. A single visit to a bloom dusts them with grains that remain attached far longer than on bare chitin. This means more food brought home, more nourishment for offspring, and, because evolution cares deeply about such details, more descendants carrying genes for just a little more fuzziness. Over many generations, these hairs spread and multiply. They thicken into brushes along the legs, soften across the abdomen, and begin forming specialized structures that seem almost impossibly well suited for the task of pollen transport. To an outside observer, it might appear as though bees deliberately adopted a cozy wardrobe. But bees become fuzzy not for comfort, but because physics insists. The physics of pollen is peculiar. Each grain is covered in microscopic hooks, ridges, or bumps designed to cling to whatever they touch. These surface features, evolved originally to help pollen adhere to pollinators and receptive plant structures, turn out to be perfectly compatible with the emerging fuzz of bees. Like Velcro meeting its match, the grains bond effortlessly with bee hairs. A brief brush against a flower can dust a bee with hundreds of pollen grains, each one hitching a ride to the next bloom. But raw fuzziness is only the beginning. As pollen collection becomes central to survival, bee bodies shift in more intricate ways. Hairs begin to vary in length and thickness depending on location. Some form stiff, comb-like arrays ideal for gathering pollen from deep within flowers. Others become feather-like, maximizing surface area to capture airborne grains. Even the spacing between hairs becomes an adaptive feature, tuned to trap particles efficiently while still allowing bees to clean themselves. Cleaning, in fact, becomes an art. A bee cannot simply rely on random pollen accumulation. It must manage its cargo. Too much loose pollen and flight becomes inefficient. Too little organization and the pollen cannot be packed properly for transport. This leads to the evolution of grooming behaviors. Delicate, practiced motions using legs equipped with tiny combs and brushes. Watching a bee groom itself is like observing a tiny artisan sorting materials with precision, though the bee itself approaches the task with quiet practicality rather than artistry. Specialized structures soon develop on the hind legs, the beginnings of the pollen-carrying apparatus. In some lineages, these take the form of pollen baskets, smooth depressions surrounded by strong hairs that hold compacted pollen masses. In others, fuzzy pads create a velvety surface upon which pollen adheres naturally. These adaptations are not universal among all bees, but they reflect the diverse ways evolution experiments with the simple idea of carrying dust better. Inside the body, changes unfold in parallel. Digestive systems refine their ability to process pollen proteins. Flight muscles strengthen to support the increasing weight of pollen loads. Mandibles adapt for manipulating floral structures rather than subduing prey. The bee begins to act less like a hunter and more like a harvester, an insect designed for gathering rather than grappling. Even vision continues adjusting. While color perception began evolving before bees themselves emerged, bees refine their ability to detect shapes and patterns that guide them more precisely to pollen-rich flowers. Their world becomes a tapestry of cues, petal outlines, ultraviolet maps, and the subtle shimmer of pollen dust waiting to be collected. The fuzz that began as a passive accident evolves into an active tool. Bees brush through petals with the confidence of creatures whose bodies have been shaped for this environment. They lift off from flowers carrying bright yellow or orange pollen masses on their legs, like tiny cargo pilots making deliberate deliveries. These loads are heavy relative to their size, but the payoff is immense. Every trip provides nourishment, stability, and a future. Meanwhile, flowers respond in kind. Those that dust bees most effectively see more successful reproduction, encouraging traits that complement bee fuzziness, pollen that clings better, floral shapes that guide bees more precisely, and structures that position pollen exactly where it will be picked up. The coevolutionary dance continues, flower and bee adjusting to one another in an intimate partnership neither side consciously understands. But here, evolution has achieved something remarkable. An insect whose anatomy is not merely compatible with pollen gathering, but perfected for it. A creature that wears its function on its body, every hair an affirmation of the efficiency of natural selection. What was once a wasp gliding through ancient forests is now a fuzzy, determined worker of the flowering world. An accidental genius shaped by particles too small to see without magnification, yet powerful enough to define an entire lineage. And as bees take to the air in their new, softly bristled forms, the world hums a little differently. The landscape is no longer just blooming. It is being worked, visited, cared for by creatures built for the task. The pollen carriers have arrived. As bees continue shaping their bodies around the demands of harvesting, another evolutionary frontier opens: vision. To move effectively through a world teeming with flowers, bees must do more than simply spot color. They must interpret it. They must distinguish the meaningful from the meaningless, sort the signal from the noise. And so evolution begins adjusting their eyes, not through sudden innovation, but through countless tiny refinements that gradually transform how bees perceive the world. Many animals see the landscape as humans do, or even more narrowly, with color ranges restricted to wavelengths we consider ordinary. But bees drift toward a different spectrum altogether. Their vision extends into ultraviolet light, a realm of wavelengths entirely invisible to us. To a bee, sunlight reveals patterns, textures, and glows that the human eye will never naturally detect. What we see as a simple yellow flower, a bee may see as a luminous structure streaked with ultraviolet runways leading toward its center. At first, this visual tuning offers only small advantages: a clearer distinction between one flower species and another, or improved ability to locate nectar-rich regions. But even small advantages matter deeply in the unending negotiation between pollinator and bloom. Each generation with slightly more sensitive visual receptors navigates the world with greater precision, finding reward with less effort and fewer mistakes. This efficiency compounds, shaping bee behavior and physiology in tandem. Meanwhile, flowers, ever the experimenters, begin taking advantage of this new visual landscape bees can perceive. Flowers do not evolve with intent, but their reproductive success hinges on attracting reliable pollinators. Plants whose petals reflect ultraviolet patterns are visited more often, and those visits translate into more seeds. Over millions of years, flowers refine their displays, crafting subtle but effective guides, patterns that radiate from the petals inward like arrows, dots, or shimmering rings. These designs act as maps, offering a quiet promise: come this way. The sweetness is here. Flowers whisper directions in a color most creatures will never notice. To a bee, this hidden world feels straightforward and intuitive. The patterns cut through the visual clutter of a blooming meadow, pointing them efficiently toward nectar sources. Some flowers use ultraviolet patches to mimic shadows, giving bees the illusion of depth where none exists, encouraging a more direct landing approach. Others create contrasting bullseye shapes, helping bees quickly locate the exact spot where pollen awaits. Even the shape of petals begins to harmonize with visual cues, forming little stages where bees can land with stability. These visual guides are not always symmetrical or predictable. Some flowers offer elaborate displays, intricate ultraviolet networks that resemble stained glass to a bee's compound eye. Others remain plain, relying on subtle cues that only the most perceptive pollinators will discern. This diversity mirrors the astonishing variety of pollination strategies that unfold as angiosperms continue expanding across ecosystems. Bees, in turn, refine other parts of their visual system. Their compound eyes, mosaics of tiny facets, evolve to detect motion quickly, helping them hover near petals without colliding with obstacles. They become adept at judging distances with precision, a crucial skill when approaching blooms nestled between sharp leaves or narrow stems. Their brains, small as they are, develop efficient ways of processing patterns and memorizing floral layouts. Many bees can recall the shapes, colors, and arrangements of flowers they visited minutes or even hours earlier, allowing them to navigate with surprising competence. This cognitive flexibility allows bees to create a mental map of a meadow, identifying which patches offer the best resources and which must be avoided. Through learning and memory, bees become partners not just with individual flowers, but with entire blooming communities. Each foraging trip becomes a loop of observation, recognition, and decision-making, carried out in seconds, yet refined by millions of years of slow adaptation. The relationship between bees and flowers grows more complex as these visual abilities mature. Flowers that rely heavily on bee pollination evolve increasingly distinctive ultraviolet signals, creating territories of color visible only to their most trusted messengers. In habitats with high plant diversity, intense competition drives flowers to innovate further, adjusting the intensity of their ultraviolet reflections, altering the thickness of their patterns, or modifying the timing of their petal openings to align with the rhythm of bee foraging. Bees, meanwhile, sharpen their ability to discriminate among these signals. They begin preferring patterns that promise reliable rewards. Some species become specialists, committing themselves to particular flower types whose ultraviolet signatures they understand intuitively. Others remain flexible, moving between species but always guided by the coded invitations written in light. The evolution of ultraviolet vision in bees signals more than just a sensory upgrade. It marks the emergence of a shared language. Though neither bees nor flowers possess intentions or consciousness in the human sense, their interaction behaves like communication. One sends a message, the other interprets it, and both benefit from the exchange. The boundaries between biology and behavior blur into a system of coevolution more intimate than any simple predator-prey relationship. Walking through a field today, we miss most of this conversation. We see colors, but not the layered messages beneath them. The petals appear smooth, simple, decorative. Yet if we could borrow the eyes of a bee for even a moment, the field would erupt in patterns. Bold arrows, glowing trails, shimmering halos, a secret festival of signals that flowers have been broadcasting for tens of millions of years. In this encoded world, bees follow pathways invisible to us, tracing lines of ultraviolet that thread the landscape together. Their flight becomes the movement of a translator reading signals we were never meant to understand. And as bees grow fluent in this language, the partnership deepens. Flowers become more expressive. Bees become more perceptive. Together, without ever meeting socially or exchanging deliberate agreements, they create one of the most elegant communication systems nature has ever assembled. The world has grown brighter for bees, not because the sun shines differently, but because evolution has opened a new spectrum of meaning. As the partnership between bees and flowering plants grows more intricate, the natural world begins to fragment into countless small opportunities, niches waiting to be filled by insects willing to adapt. The landscape, once dominated by broad strokes of green and occasional bursts of bloom, now hosts a complex mosaic of flowering species. Each of these blooms offers slightly different rewards, varying nectar depths, pollen textures, bloom schedules, petal shapes, and chemical compositions. To bees, this diversity opens a spectrum of choices, and not all bees respond the same way. Some bees drift through this tapestry with open-minded enthusiasm. These are the generalists, pollinators who visit many different flowers, adjusting their foraging strategies as they go. They behave like flexible travelers wandering from buffet to buffet, sampling whatever is available. Some bees date widely, others settle down early. Generalist bees thrive especially in unstable or highly varied environments. When one flower species declines due to drought, climate shifts, or seasonal timing, generalists simply move on to another. Their adaptability is their superpower, allowing them to maintain consistent foraging success even as habitats change. Their bodies tend to be moderately built for a wide range of floral structures, tongues of average length, grooming limbs versatile rather than specialized, and patterns of flight that favor exploration over strict routes. But evolution rarely leaves things simple. As flowering plants diversify, some bees find themselves drifting toward narrower and more specialized relationships. Perhaps a particular bloom offers nectar that is especially rich, or pollen unusually nutritious. Perhaps the flower opens at times when most other pollinators are inactive. Or perhaps its structure is difficult for generalists to access, but perfectly suited to a bee with slightly longer mouthparts or stronger legs. When advantages begin stacking up in one direction, specialization is born. Specialist bees often display remarkable anatomical and behavioral adaptations. Some evolve elongated tongues capable of reaching the deep recesses of tubular flowers that generalists cannot navigate. Others develop muscular bodies able to vibrate certain blossoms in a technique called buzz pollination, shaking loose pollen that remains hidden from any bee lacking such skill. Still others synchronize their life cycles with the flowering schedule of a single plant. A seasonal partnership so tightly timed that the bee's emergence is almost an extension of the bloom's opening. This commitment brings efficiency. A specialist bee, fully attuned to its chosen flower, wastes little time searching for resources. It knows exactly where to go, how to land, how to extract nectar efficiently, and how to carry pollen shaped specifically for its body's architecture. For these bees, wandering would be unnecessary and even wasteful. Specialization turns the world into a focused, predictable routine. Yet this efficiency comes with risk. A specialist tied too tightly to a single floral lineage may face hardship if that plant suffers due to climatic shifts, ecological upheaval, competition, or simple unpredictability. A late frost, a prolonged drought, or a change in blooming season can leave specialist bees stranded without their primary resource. Meanwhile, the generalists glide through such disruptions with comparative ease, dipping into whatever alternative blossoms emerge. The tension between wandering and narrowing continues to drive diversification within bee lineages. Over time, both strategies succeed, but in different contexts. In stable environments with consistent blooming seasons, specialists flourish. In dynamic landscapes where conditions fluctuate yearly or even daily, generalists dominate. This coexistence allows bee diversity to explode, giving rise to an assortment of forms and behaviors that would not exist if every bee followed the same path. The flowers respond in kind. Those heavily reliant on specialist bees evolve in ways that further deepen the relationship. Their filaments lengthen or shorten to match the exact reach of a bee's body. Their nectar becomes calibrated in sweetness or viscosity to suit a particular tongue. Their petals sometimes grow into shapes that cradle their specific pollinator, offering a perfect landing platform that other insects cannot use. The plant and the bee co-evolve, adjusting themselves generation after generation in a quiet conversation of needs and rewards. Meanwhile, flowers frequented by generalist bees take a different evolutionary route. They remain accessible, offering broad landing surfaces and nectar placed where a variety of insects can reach it. Their pollen structures may be looser, easier for many species to sweep up. They bet on abundance and accessibility rather than exclusivity. This divergence, specialist versus generalist flowers and bees, creates an entire ecological tapestry where relationships vary from casual acquaintance to nearly exclusive partnership. And because each bee and each flower occupies a slightly different niche, competition is softened. Instead of all pollinators battling for the same limited resources, each finds its own rhythm within the ecosystem, reducing conflict and allowing multiple species to coexist. The interplay also influences bee behavior. Some species develop distinct foraging routes, visiting the same patches of flowers at the same time each day, patterns called floral constancy. This behavior reduces confusion and increases pollination efficiency. A bee repeatedly visiting the same flower species transfers pollen more effectively than one mixing many species in random order. For specialists, this constancy is inherent. For generalists, it becomes an optional strategy used when one flower type temporarily dominates the season. As bees settle into these ecological niches, the world becomes richer in its living details. Meadows no longer host a uniform buzz, but a layered chorus, each species humming to its own preferences, whether that means sipping from any bloom that catches the eye or returning with devotion to a single beloved flower. The relationship between bees and plants deepens, but also branches. This diversification sets the stage for future ecological complexity, for new evolutionary experiments, and for the unfolding richness of pollination that will eventually shape enormous portions of the planet. In the blossoming world of angiosperms, some bees remain adventurers, others become loyalists, and the flowers, always experimenting, welcome both into their quiet economy of sunlight turned sweet. Before honeybees and bumblebees came to symbolize the entire bee family in the human imagination, the vast majority of bees lived, and still live, unnoticed. They do not gather in buzzing clusters at hive entrances. They do not store golden reserves in architectural combs. They do not pledge themselves to a queen, nor do they divide labor with admirable social order. Most bees simply choose a quiet home, work alone, and raise their offspring with the kind of calm efficiency that rarely makes headlines. Not all bees enjoy roommates. These solitary bees inhabit a world of intimate spaces and precise habits. A hillside dotted with small holes might appear unremarkable, but each opening could be an entrance to a carefully constructed nest. In a meadow thick with tall grasses, a hollow stem, invited by decay or by last season's weather, becomes the perfect nursery. A fallen branch, softening under time and moisture, offers countless crevices where life can be tucked away. Even in arid landscapes, where soil hardens under the sun, solitary bees patiently carve tunnels through packed earth, shaping chambers one grain at a time. Their lives begin with a search, quiet, thorough, and profoundly practical. A female solitary bee surveys the landscape for the right nesting site. Not too exposed, not too moist, not already claimed by another. This search may take more time than any other part of her work, for the nest is not a simple shelter, but the entire foundation of her lineage. Once she chooses a site, she begins shaping it, not with architectural flair, but with understated skill honed over millions of years. If the nest is underground, she digs with determination. Her forelegs, evolved for strength, move soil aside in small rhythmic motions. Each tunnel she excavates branches into separate chambers, spacious enough for a growing larva, but compact enough to regulate temperature and humidity. If the nest is in a hollow stem, she arranges her chambers end to end, dividing them with partitions made from chewed leaves, mud, or resin. These materials are chosen with care. Some resist mold, others repel predators, and others hold moisture just enough to protect the developing brood. Inside these chambers, solitary bees practice a level of parental dedication that often surprises those who imagine bees solely in social contexts. A mother bee collects pollen and nectar not for herself, but for her future offspring. She mixes them into a soft, nutrient-rich paste, an individual meal for each child she will never meet. Once the food is arranged, she lays a single egg atop it and seals the chamber. This careful provisioning is repeated for each cell, each tiny room becoming its own self-contained world. Solitary bees do not monitor their young after this point. They do not hover over nurseries or defend larvae aggressively. Instead, they trust that their preparations, food, architecture, placement, will guide the next generation safely through development. Their role is quiet but profound, a single mother building futures one sealed chamber at a time. In this silence, predators and parasites lurk. Some insects specialize in invading these nests when the mother is away gathering pollen. They slip into open chambers and leave their own eggs behind, trusting their larvae to consume the food supply, or sometimes the rightful inhabitant, once they hatch. These threats force solitary bees to adopt strategies that look simple but reflect deep evolutionary refinement. Selecting concealed nest sites, sealing entrances with subtle camouflage, or shifting nesting times to evade certain parasitic species. Survival often hinges not on physical combat, but on timing and discretion. Despite their solitary nature, these bees influence ecosystems as profoundly as any social species. Their foraging patterns help maintain plant communities across vast regions. Because different solitary species prefer different flowers and operate at different times of day or seasons, they form a layered pollination network, one that quietly stabilizes ecosystems without the need for coordinated effort. Their independence distributes their impact across landscapes, making them resilient to disturbances that might devastate a single, centralized colony. Some solitary bees exhibit remarkable specialization. Leafcutter bees, for example, trim neat circles from leaves to build the walls of their brood cells. Mason bees gather mud to partition their nests with the care of miniature bricklayers. Carpenter bees carve tunnels into dead wood, creating galleries that expand each year as new generations inherit the space. Each solitary lineage adapts to its chosen material, transforming simple resources into reliable architecture. Their lives unfold within precise rhythms. A leafcutter might finish her nest chamber and fly immediately to gather more pollen. A mason bee might wait for the mud to dry before beginning another partition. A ground nesting bee senses the subtle changes in soil temperature, knowing exactly when to seal her entrance for the season. Each movement is humble, yet each reveals how deeply evolutionary pressures have refined these creatures into efficient, self-reliant craftsmen. While social bees draw attention with their cooperative spectacles, solitary bees exist in quieter harmony with the world around them. They do not require complex communication to survive. They do not rely on armies of siblings to defend a colony. Their lives are built on simple, repeated acts, digging, gathering, provisioning, that collectively sustain their species. In their independence lies their strength. When one nest fails, it does not doom a colony. When a habitat shifts, many will adapt in different ways, spreading risk across thousands of tiny, unconnected homes. As our story drifts through their world, it becomes clear that solitary bees embody an ancient evolutionary truth. Survival does not always demand society. Sometimes it requires only patience, skill, and a well-placed chamber filled with enough food to nourish the future. and so the landscape hums softly with unheralded labor. Beneath our feet, inside stems we overlook, and behind bark we never peel away, solitary bees build their modest, essential cities, one hidden room at a time. In the vast ancestry of bees, cooperation does not burst onto the stage fully formed. It unfurls slowly, hesitantly, and often temporarily, as if evolution is gently prodding the idea from multiple angles, asking, could this work? For long ages, solitary living has dominated bee life. Individuals digging nests, provisioning cells, and raising future generations independently. But environments shift, seasons fluctuate, predators adapt, and resources pulse across landscapes in uneven rhythms. These pressures nudge certain bees toward a curious possibility. What if more than one generation lived together? The earliest hints of sociality are not dramatic. A mother bee remains in her nest a little longer than usual, perhaps guarding her brood from parasites, or reusing a tunnel she has invested considerable effort into building. Her daughters emerge not into a world of immediate independence, but into a home that still offers structure and shelter. Instead of dispersing instantly, some linger, helping their mother expand the nest or gather provisions. Cooperation begins as a polite suggestion, not a rule. These small acts of shared activity create ripples. A nest with multiple adults guarding it is harder for predators or parasitic insects to invade. A mother with assistance can produce more offspring, and those offspring, in turn, may be more likely to remain. As generations begin to overlap, the nest shifts from a seasonal project into something more stable, a resource worth defending, investing in, and improving. But this early experiment is fragile. Cooperation is not instinctual for creatures whose lineage has relied on solitary survival. Conflicts arise. Who lays eggs? Who gathers food? Who stays behind to guard the developing larvae? Without clear divisions of labor, group living can collapse under the weight of competition. Some species try cooperation for a time, only to abandon it when conditions change or when evolutionary advantages fail to materialize. Yet in certain lineages, the balance begins to stabilize. Daughters exhibit subtle behavioral shifts, becoming more inclined to help rather than disperse. Mothers reduce reproduction as they age, allowing younger females to take over egg-laying responsibilities. Roles begin to differentiate. The beginnings of caste-like behavior appear, not rigid, not absolute, but distinct enough to influence survival outcomes. Nests start to grow larger, though modestly at first. A few females cooperating can supply more provisions than one alone. They excavate greater networks of tunnels or refine existing cavities into multi-chambered homes. Some improve ventilation by adjusting entrances or altering chamber arrangements. Others become more vigilant, learning the patterns of predators and developing strategies to repel them. Collective defense that gives cooperating groups an edge. But cooperation alone does not guarantee success. Social groups must contend with new problems. Disease spreads more quickly among clustered individuals. Food shortages can trigger internal competition. Hierarchical disputes can destabilize entire colonies. Evolution tests these challenges continuously, favoring species that can refine their social structures and punishing those that cannot withstand the pressure. For many bees, the experiment ends here. They return to solitary life, their brief flirtations with cooperation leaving only faint behavioral traces. In a smaller number of lineages, however, cooperation deepens into something enduring. Brood care becomes coordinated. Older females guard and maintain the nest, while younger ones take on foraging roles. The timing of offspring emergence becomes synchronized so that multiple adults can tend to the brood simultaneously. Communication remains subtle. Vibrations through the substrate, chemical cues, patterns of movement, but sufficient to keep the group functioning as a whole. Early eusocial bees are not miniature societies in the grand architectural sense. They do not yet weave elaborate wax structures or host massive colonies. Instead, their nests are simple and functional, clusters of brood cells lined with resin or soil, arranged with increasing organization. What makes these nests remarkable is not their structure, but their continuity. A nest that persists across multiple seasons represents a major evolutionary step, transforming bees from ephemeral tenant builders into more permanent ecological participants. With stability comes opportunity. Some species experiment with larger social groups, though not all succeed. A nest with too many members may become untenable. Resource demands grow too quickly, or conflicts escalate beyond resolution. Others find a delicate balance, just enough cooperation to improve survival, just enough individuality to avoid disrupting the hierarchy. This middle ground shapes the earliest foundations of bee sociality. Division of labor becomes more consistent, though still flexible. Certain individuals specialize in guarding, others in collecting food, others in maintaining the brood cells. These roles shift depending on age, strength, and environmental conditions. Sociality is not yet an architectural masterpiece. It is an active sketch, redrawn each generation. The benefits, however, are undeniable. Groups can exploit food sources more efficiently, defend nests more effectively, and withstand seasonal hardships better than solitary individuals. This resilience allows some eusocial lineages to spread into habitats where solitary bees falter, regions with short flowering windows, unpredictable weather, or intense predator pressure. Still, the experiment remains delicate. Cooperation can collapse under stress, and many species exist in a state of partial sociality, neither fully solitary nor fully communal. These transitional states are evolutionary laboratories, testing what works, discarding what doesn't, and refining what does. Through this long, gentle arc of experimentation, the foundations are laid for the complex societies that will emerge later in bee evolution. A future where some species will build vast colonies, develop intricate communication, and reshape entire ecosystems through their collective labor. But for now, sociality remains a soft, tentative script written in the quiet chambers of shared nests, a whisper of what bees might become, given time, pressure, and the simple courage to try living together. Long before humans ever tasted honey or admired its amber glow, bees discovered a truth about the world that would shape their future. Flowers are generous only when the season is right. A meadow in full bloom looks eternal to the momentary eye. But to a bee lineage spanning millennia, abundance is temporary. Rain patterns shift. Cold fronts arrive early. Drought stretches thin across once fertile valleys. A year of plenty can be followed by months when not a single petal unfurls. For bees relying on nectar as their primary energy source, this inconsistency poses a dilemma: how to survive when sweetness disappears. The solution that emerges is not simple gathering, nor frantic searching for alternative resources. Instead, bees evolve a way to capture fleeting sunlight, distilled through flowers into sugar, and store it in a form that remains stable far beyond the blooms themselves. Honey is not luxury, it's insurance. To understand honey's significance, imagine the life of an early social bee colony facing its first unpredictable winter. The flowers that sustain them vanish as temperatures drop. Nectar dries up, pollen becomes scarce, and the hours warm enough for flight shrink to thin slices of afternoon. Without stored energy, the colony cannot maintain even minimal activity. The workers would succumb to cold, the queen would starve. The entire lineage could collapse within weeks. But honey changes everything. It is more than a resource. It is time made edible. The process begins with nectar, a watery solution rich in sugars but prone to fermentation and spoilage. Nectar itself cannot last through months of cold. But bees, with biological ingenuity built through generations, transform it. Workers collect nectar and carry it back to the nest in their specialized honey stomachs. There, enzymes begin to break down complex sugars into simpler, more stable forms. Upon returning to the nest, bees pass the nectar from mouth to mouth, each exchange further altering its chemistry. This is not sharing, it is processing, an assembly line of biochemical refinement. When the mixture is ready, bees deposit it into wax cells and begin the slow work of evaporation. By fanning their wings, they create a current of dry air that draws moisture from the nectar until it thickens into honey. The wax caps placed over each filled cell seal it from humidity and microbes, locking away the stored energy like a treasure preserved in crystal. This honey is astonishingly stable. Incorrectly stored in a human kitchen, it can crystallize, ferment, or collect dust. But in the careful architecture of the bee nest, protected from contamination and kept at the right humidity, honey can last months or even years without degrading. For a species navigating unpredictable climates, this longevity is a triumph. The biological importance of honey cannot be overstated. It allows colonies to remain active during seasons when flight is impossible. Workers can tend to the queen, warm the brood, defend the nest, and maintain internal structure even when flowers lie dormant beneath frost or drought. Honey is fuel not only for the body, but for continuity. Without it, early social bees would struggle to bridge the gap between one flowering season and the next. Their efforts at cooperation collapsing under environmental pressure. The ability to store honey also influences colony size. Larger nests require resources far beyond what nectar can provide day by day. Honey allows bees to grow their population without fear of immediate scarcity. It supports complex behavior, defending a spacious nest, feeding developing larvae continuously, and maintaining the temperature needed for brood survival. Each of these activities consumes energy that honey readily supplies. Even bees' internal physiology adjusts around this innovation. Workers develop specialized glands that produce wax, enabling them to construct the cells necessary for storage. Their metabolism tunes itself to handle both the processing and consumption of honey efficiently. Honey becomes the thread tying together architecture, behavior, and seasonal survival. Yet honey's evolution is not uniform across bee lineages. Many solitary species and even some social ones never adopt large-scale honey storage. Their life cycles sync tightly with blooming periods. They produce offspring when food is abundant, and retreat or die off when scarcity arrives. Honey in these systems would be excess effort, an unnecessary investment. But for the lineages that pursue multi-seasonal survival or live in temperate regions with harsh winters, honey is essential. The environmental pressures shaping honey production vary greatly. In regions where winter arrives predictably, storing energy becomes a reliable strategy. In areas with erratic rainfall, honey safeguards colonies during dry seasons when flowers may not appear at all. Even predators influence honey behavior. Raids from other insects or animals force bees to develop defensive strategies that revolve around protecting their stores. Honey also pushes bees to refine their sense of timing. They must predict seasonal changes, ramp up nectar collection during peak bloom, and adjust colony behavior to match resource availability. Workers shift roles as flower availability changes, some becoming dedicated foragers, while others process nectar or build comb. The colony becomes a dynamic organism responding to the pulse of the environment. What begins as a simple act, concentrating nectar, unfolds into a sophisticated survival system involving chemistry, architecture, behavior, and climate sensitivity. This system allows honey-making bees to inhabit regions their ancestors could never endure. A lineage that once depended entirely on the moment now carries the past into the future in the form of golden stores. Honey grants these bees not just calories, but continuity. It turns sunlight into safety, seasons into cycles, and uncertainty into something survivable. And through this innovation, bees gain the resilience to persist despite cold spells, famines, storms, and all the unpredictable rhythms Earth offers. In the quiet heart of the nest, inside a wax cell glistening with transformed nectar, lies the essence of bee endurance. Sweetness shaped into time. Across the long sweep of geological time, Earth's climate rarely sits still. Temperatures rise and fall in immense arcs. Glaciers creep outward and then shrink back again. Oceans swell and retreat, and entire continents drift through zones of humidity, dryness, and cold. For bees, These shifts present challenges not measured in days or seasons, but in thousands and millions of years, slow pressures that shape their lineage with a steady hand. In the warm epochs that punctuate Earth's history, flowering ecosystems flourish. Meadows sprawl across wide regions, forests thrum with nectar-rich understories, and bees enjoy an abundance that allows them to diversify in number and form. But these periods do not last. As ice ages sweep down from higher latitudes, temperatures drop, and the familiar rhythms of blooming seasons begin to falter. The flowers shrink back, retreating into pockets of survivable warmth. Bee populations follow, contracting and shifting as the landscape changes under their wings. And yet, bees do not panic. Their resilience is built on millions of years of adaptation to environments that have never been stable. They change quietly, altering habits, timing, and territory with a kind of understated persistence. In colder periods, many species adjust their emergence schedules. Instead of appearing early in the year, they wait for later, more reliable warmth. Their internal clocks, governed by temperature cues and subtle environmental signals, shift slowly to match the new climates. These changes unfold over generations, not as sudden pivot points, but as gentle drifts in timing. Bees survive mostly by refusing to panic. Some lineages develop behavioral ways to cope with shorter flowering seasons. In regions swept by cold, solitary bees may truncate their life cycles, completing all essential tasks within narrower windows. They dig nests in locations that hold warmth, sun-facing slopes, sandy soils that retain heat, or decomposing wood that maintains a stable microclimate. Others choose flowers that bloom despite cold snaps, forming new partnerships that help them endure the harsher world. For social species, the stakes are even higher. Colonies must store enough energy to bridge long winters or seasonal droughts. Honey-making bees, especially, are shaped by climate. Cold regions favor lineages that can amass substantial stores and maintain a constant nest temperature, even when the outside world sinks into deep frost. Workers cluster together, vibrating their flight muscles to generate heat, an act of collective endurance that allows the queen and brood to survive, while the world beyond their nest lies silent and frozen. But not all bees respond by huddling in warm chambers. Some take a different path entirely. They become specialists in surviving cold directly. A few species adapt anti-freeze-like properties in their bodies, allowing them to overwinter as adults in hidden crevices. Others burrow deeper underground, letting the soil serve as an insulating blanket through the glacial cold. For these bees, endurance becomes a personal affair. They wait, perfectly still, for months or even years, emerging only when the world finally tilts back toward warmth. As the planet moves through cycles of cooling and warming, forests shift dramatically. Dense, flowering canopies contract as colder climates push tree lines southward. Grasslands expand across continents, unfolding seas of grasses that provide fewer floral resources. In these new landscapes, bees must either adapt to sparse blooms or follow the retreating forests into warmer refuges. Many succeed, Others disappear quietly, leaving no drama behind. Just a gap in a lineage where a species once hovered patiently over blossoms. Yet climate shifts do not act only through cold. Periods of intense heat and drought pose their own trials. Flowers wilt early, nectar runs thin, and pollen becomes scarce. Bees respond with behavioral thrift. Foragers extend their search radius, visiting more distant flowers. Specialist bees sometimes loosen their preferences, turning to alternative plants when their usual partners struggle. Those who cannot adapt face sharp declines, especially if their life cycles rely tightly on synchronous blooming. Some bees, however, find unlikely opportunities in these harsher times. Plants stressed by drought may produce fewer flowers, but concentrate resources differently, sometimes increasing nectar quality in the blooms that remain. Certain bees capitalize on these rare but rich rewards, altering their foraging patterns to match the new distributions. Even geography reshapes itself in ways that ripple through bee evolution. As glaciers expand, they carve valleys, reroute rivers, and alter wind patterns that influence plant communities. When the ice retreats, it leaves behind fresh soils, young meadows, and open habitats ready to be colonized. Bees disperse into these new territories with remarkable speed, riding warm fronts and following blooming waves across landscapes reborn from melting ice. Each new habitat becomes a testing ground for innovation, new nesting sites, new flower partnerships, new seasonal rhythms. Throughout all this change, bees seldom rely on a single strategy. Their diversity becomes their shield. Some species hedge their bets through flexible behavior, switching flowers as needed. Others refine narrow partnerships that thrive in specific climates. Some stay local, hugging the stable edges of warm refuges. Others roam widely, tracking the world's shifting mosaic of blooms. It is this mosaic of responses, not a single miracle adaptation, that allows bees to endure across deep time. When climates shift too quickly or too dramatically, some species vanish, unable to adjust to their timing or habits. But countless others persist, their endurance woven into quiet habits and slow, steady change. Each survival story is small in scale, a slight shift in emergence time, a new flower preference, a deeper nest. But collectively, these stories form a lineage that spans ice ages, droughts, warming periods, and the unpredictable pulses of Earth itself. Bees have never known a stable world. Their resilience is not born of strength or speed, but of adaptation. Patient, unhurried, and endlessly inventive. And so, as glaciers advance and retreat, and as prairies replace forests only to be replaced again, bees continue in their quiet work, refusing panic, adjusting where needed, and carrying life forward on wings that have weathered more climates than humans can imagine. In a world where survival depends on knowing which flower opens when, where nectar pools most deeply, and where danger waits in the shadows beneath a leaf, communication becomes essential. But bees, who live in the hush of wax chambers and navigate environments filled with wind, petals, and shifting scents, do not use language as we know it. Instead, They rely on gestures, chemical whispers, and the intricate rhythms of their bodies. Their messages do not echo, they emanate. The earliest social bees likely used nothing more complex than scent cues. A returning forager carried the aroma of the flowers she visited, traces of nectar, pollen dust, and the subtle chemical fingerprints of specific plants. These scents clung to her legs and thorax, carried home as unintended bulletin boards for the rest of the colony. Other bees, brushing past her, would catch a faint message, a hint of sweetness, a note of a newly blooming species, a clue that somewhere beyond the nest lay opportunity. Over time, these accidental signals grew more deliberate. Foragers with particularly valuable discoveries began lingering longer at the nest entrance, allowing their scent to spread. Bees nearby learned to pay attention to the potency of these chemical traces. Stronger scents often meant richer foraging grounds. Without words, without any conscious decision-making, a system of information sharing began to emerge. But the world of flowers is a shifting one. Nectar ebbs and flows with weather, soil moisture, and sunlight. A meadow abundant in the morning may offer little by afternoon. For bees, timing matters. They require a communication method not just for identifying resources, but for coordinating effort. It is here that movement, the body itself, takes center stage. Among certain bee lineages, foragers returning from the outside world perform simple movements that gradually evolve into more sophisticated signals. These motions begin as restlessness. A bee excited by her find trembles slightly, pacing within the nest. Others respond to this excitement, noticing subtle shifts in posture and energy. Over many generations, this restless enthusiasm becomes more purposeful, condensing into repeated gestures that convey direction and distance. The hive becomes a library of tiny movements. In more advanced social species, this system reaches a remarkable refinement. A forager traces specific patterns, her body vibrating with information. She moves in circles, then in straight lines, then in circles again, creating a looping sequence filled with meaning. The duration of her central path suggests distance. The angle of her body relative to vertical suggests direction. Bees never argue about directions. They just dance. What makes this form of communication extraordinary is not its complexity, but its practicality. The dance need not be perfect. It need only be consistent enough for other bees to interpret. They do not seek precision measured in degrees, but a general understanding, a region of space, a pattern of blooms, a promising slope warmed by sunlight. The dancers convey just enough information to guide their companions toward success. Scent overlays this movement, adding nuance. A bee's dance is not merely a map, it is scented with the flowers she visited. Pollen clinging to her hairs adds a second layer of meaning, allowing followers to recognize the plant species even before they take flight. These chemical details help foragers narrow their search and reduce wasted energy, a crucial advantage in environments where blooming windows are brief. But communication in bee colonies extends well beyond foraging. Bees share information about threats, health, and nest conditions through an elegant combination of touch and timing. A sudden vibration, sharp and rhythmic, can alert bees to danger nearby. A gentle, repeated pulse may signal that new brood cells require attention. Even the warmth of a bee's body conveys meaning, communicating where brood needs heating or cooling. Inside the nest, traffic flows with surprising order. Bees brushing past one another exchange subtle cues that regulate colony behavior. A bee returning heavily laden with nectar may signal others to assist in processing it. A bee searching for space to unload her cargo may prompt workers to expand the comb. These interactions are brief, often lasting mere seconds, yet they keep the colony functioning with remarkable efficiency. The colony's internal rhythm, who works when, who forages, who guards, who tends the brood, is shaped in part by pheromones. These chemical signals drift through the nest like invisible threads tying the colony together. Some pheromones suppress reproduction in workers, keeping the societal balance intact. Others stimulate foraging or calm the colony during moments of stress. Though bees appear serene, their lives are steeped in a constant exchange of chemical cues that govern collective action. What is striking is how little of this communication requires intention. Bees do not strategize or debate. They do not attempt to persuade. Their signals emerge from instinct honed by deep evolutionary time. Each gesture, scent, and vibration is a fragment of a system shaped by selection pressure rather than conscious design. And yet, despite its unintentional origins, the effect feels almost orchestral. Dozens, hundreds, or thousands of individuals responding to subtle cues create patterns of behavior that appear coordinated, almost choreographed. A colony adjusts to changes in flower availability, temperature, and threat through a symphony of small actions layered into collective wisdom. Efficiency is the guiding principle, not intelligence as humans measure it, nor social planning. Just the quiet certainty that information must move quickly and without confusion. In a world where flowers open and close within hours, clarity is survival. Communication without sound, without speech, without written symbols, allows bees to inhabit the landscape with exquisite sensitivity. They know where sunlight gathers on a hillside, where nectar thickens after a rain, where danger lurks, and where opportunities bloom unseen. In the stillness of a nest pulsing with hundreds of wings, information flows not through noise, but through touch, scent, vibration, and dance. A language born not from thought, but from time. For all their delicate work among flowers, bees live in a world shaped by danger. Their lives unfold beneath wings that beat in soft rhythms, yet around them lurk forces that do not share their gentle tempo. Birds with sharp eyes, insects with sharper mandibles, parasites small enough to slip between hairs, all move through the same landscapes, pulled by hunger, opportunity, and instinct. To be a bee is to navigate a world where beauty is plentiful, but safety is scarce. The earliest bee ancestors were already familiar with the threat of predation. Descended from wasps, They carried a stinger built not for defense, but for paralyzing prey. Over time, as bees shifted from hunters to harvesters, the stinger took on a new role. What had once been a tool for subduing caterpillars and spiders became a final line of protection for creatures now more interested in pollen than pursuit. Evolution rarely grants peace, only better reflexes. The transition from weapon to shield was gradual. Bees retaining the ability to sting were more likely to survive encounters with predators. Birds learned to avoid bees with bold markings. Small mammals discovered that snatching a buzzing insect came with grave disadvantages. Over many generations, bees developed warning colors, bright yellows and deep blacks that pulsed with evolutionary meaning. These stripes were not fashion. They were a coded message. I am not worth the trouble. But not all threats come swooping from above. Many arrive quietly, creeping, crawling, or drifting on the wind. Parasitic insects, for example, have long-trailed bees like shadows. Some species specialize in infiltrating nests, slipping past entrances when the mother is away. Once inside, they lay their eggs in unsuspecting brood cells. These intruders rely on stealth rather than strength, trusting that their larvae will hatch first and consume the resources set aside for the rightful occupants. Solitary bees, especially, face a long history of such invasions. Their defenses are practical but limited. Concealed nests, narrow entrances, partitions made of resin or mud. Some species adopt deceptive behaviors, filling and sealing decoy tunnels to mislead intruders. Others time their nesting to avoid peak parasite activity, emerging either earlier or later in the season. Their fight is not a battle but a quiet contest of timing and caution. In social species, the threat of parasites amplifies. A colony offers far more resources than a solitary nest: wax, pollen stores, brood chambers, and thus draws far more attention. To resist invaders, bees evolve both chemical and behavioral defenses. Guards stationed at the nest entrance detect intruders by scent. If a bee does not share the colony's unique chemical signature, she is met with swift rejection, or worse. Inside the nest, workers groom one another, removing mites or spores before they spread. In some lineages, bees vibrate their bodies in rhythmic motions that hinder parasite development or disrupt invading organisms. Yet for every defense, nature crafts a countermeasure. Mites, some no bigger than dust specks, evolve ways to cling to bees unnoticed. Certain parasitic flies learn to mimic the scent of workers, slipping past guards to deposit their eggs deep within the colony. Brood diseases exploit the moist warmth of nests, spreading among larvae that cannot yet defend themselves. These pressures forge a relentless evolutionary arms race, where each gain in defense is matched, sooner or later, by an inventive threat. Predators large enough to pluck bees from the air add another layer of challenge. Birds with quick reflexes and sharp beaks learn to snatch bees mid-flight, sometimes avoiding the sting by eating only the thorax. Lizards wait near flowers, ready to ambush an unsuspecting forager. Even other insects, mantises, robber flies, spiders, practice stillness until the perfect moment to strike. Bees respond not with aggression, but with caution and speed. Their flight becomes nimble, looping, and unpredictable. Their eyes evolve to detect motion with remarkable precision, allowing them to escape threats with split-second adjustments. Some species adopt swarming behaviors as protection. Although each individual bee is small, a cloud of bees can overwhelm a predator's senses, disguising the movement of any single target. Other lineages weaponize heat. Certain social bees can collectively vibrate their bodies around an intruder, often a wasp or hornet, raising the temperature until the predator can no longer survive. It is a defense that relies on unity rather than individual strength, a testament to the collaborative potential of social living. Even flowers sometimes serve as allies in survival. Plants with deep corollas require specialized bee visitors, making it difficult for larger predators to reach bees as they feed. Other flowers bloom in clusters, allowing bees to move rapidly between blossoms, spending little time exposed. Through coevolution, bees and flowers quietly shape the tools of survival together, even when their partnership is focused primarily on pollination. Chemical communication adds another thread to the defensive tapestry. Alarm pheromones spread quickly through colonies, triggering coordinated responses. These scents act as both warning and rallying cry, guiding bees to defend the nest with synchronized intensity. Workers shift their posture, raise their bodies, and position themselves strategically at entrances. Their goal is not conquest, but deterrence, to persuade danger that the reward is not worth the cost. Despite the constant threats, bees maintain a graceful composure in their daily work. They approach each flower with the same gentle persistence, collect each grain of pollen with steady dedication, and build each nest chamber with patient precision. Survival, for them, is not a dramatic tale of conflict. It is a rhythm of adjustments, refining defenses, sharpening instincts, and moving forward despite the challenges that nibble at the edges of their existence. Predators and parasites have never stopped pressing against bees' evolutionary boundaries. But bees, in turn, have never stopped adapting, quietly strengthening their reflexes, adjusting their strategies, and meeting each new threat with the same soft resilience that characterizes their movements among the flowers. In this chapter of their long journey, the bees are neither conquerors nor victims. They are artisans of endurance, shaped by the mouths, claws, and unseen invasions that surround them. And though peace may be elusive, persistence remains entirely within their reach. By the time bees have woven themselves fully into the lives of flowering plants, the world has changed in ways that no single organism could have predicted. Flowers spread across continents not just because they bloom beautifully, but because bees carry their pollen faithfully from one blossom to the next. With every landing, every brush of a leg dusted in pollen grains, bees alter the trajectory of plant life. And as plants shift, so too does the shape of the land itself. It is a reminder that even the smallest creatures can tilt the balance of the world, though bees never ask for credit. Pollination is not merely a transaction. It is a force that sculpts ecosystems. As bees continue visiting flowers over millions of years, plant species that benefit from their precise and efficient pollination begin to diversify more rapidly. They evolve new shapes, colors, and structures that appeal to different kinds of bees. Short-tongued wanderers, long-tongued specialists, early risers, late-season foragers. Each new adaptation opens further evolutionary pathways. Plants that once relied on wind or chance now lean into deliberate relationships with bees, producing fewer but more effective pollen grains, allocating more energy into nectar, and blooming with exquisite timing. This shift from randomness to partnership stabilizes entire plant communities. With bees acting as dependable couriers of pollen, flowering plants can occupy environments that were once too erratic for them. Steeper mountainsides, open grasslands, regions with variable winds. Where ancient forests once dominated, new mosaics of flowering shrubs and meadow species begin to emerge. These changes influence the animals these habitats can support. Herbivores feed on diverse blooms, predators follow them, and gradually ecosystems reorganize around a new floral heartbeat. In some environments, bee-driven pollination supports the rise of dense flowering meadows. These meadows alter soil composition as plant roots stabilize earth and cycle nutrients differently from older gymnosperm-dominated systems. Richer soils form where plants die back seasonally, leaving behind organic matter that nourishes future growth. Bees indirectly shape this process. By supporting the plants that produce these deep root networks and seasonal leaf litters, they help maintain soil fertility over vast regions. In other areas, bees influence the spread of shrubs that anchor fragile landscapes prone to erosion. Their pollination ensures these shrubs produce seeds reliably, allowing them to colonize slopes and riverbanks. As root systems strengthen, water flows change. Sediment accumulates differently. Streams carve new paths around the vegetation, creating habitats for aquatic insects, amphibians, and birds. The chain of influence extends far beyond the flower and the bee. It reaches into the water, the terrain, and the animals who rely on both. Even climate patterns respond, subtly but undeniably, to the plant communities bees help maintain. Flowering plants often participate in water cycling, releasing moisture through their leaves and shaping local humidity levels. Their foliage shades soil, reducing evaporation. Large expanses of blooming vegetation also influence how heat is absorbed and reflected across landscapes. All these microscopic shifts accumulate through time, subtly nudging weather, shaping microclimates, and stabilizing seasonal rhythms. Bee-driven pollination also boosts genetic diversity among flowering plants. When bees move pollen long distances, sometimes across entire valleys, they carry genetic material that would otherwise remain isolated. This mixing enhances resilience. Plants become better suited to survive drought, disease, and temperature fluctuations. A genetically diverse plant population weathers storms more gracefully than one in evolutionary isolation. This resilience ripples outward. Herbivores feeding on diverse plants face fewer nutritional bottlenecks. Predators depending on herbivores benefit indirectly. Pollinators themselves enjoy more reliable food webs. What begins as a simple flight from flower to flower becomes a stabilizing force woven through the entire ecosystem. In forests, bees encourage the spread of flowering understory plants. species that add complexity to habitats that once relied mainly on wind-pollinated trees. These understory blooms support insects, birds, and mammals that depend on seeds and nectar. When bees pollinate trees as well, they influence fruit production, affecting everything from small rodents to large omnivores. The forest becomes a layered world of interdependent relationships, cascading outward from tiny interactions carried out on petals. Even grasslands, often imagined as landscapes defined by wind and open space, bear the imprint of bees. Many grasses do not require pollinators, but the wildflowers that dot these plains rely heavily on bees. These flowers attract herbivores, stabilize soils, and add crucial biodiversity to regions that might otherwise be monotonous stretches of green. The presence of bees transforms these grasslands into richer, more resilient ecosystems. Through all of this, bees remain unaware of the scale of their influence. Their world revolves around petals and sunlight, the faint vibrations of a flower's landing platform beneath their feet. They do not see the forests adjusting or the soils thickening. They do not feel the climates shifting. They know only the work before them, collecting food, carrying pollen, tending nests. Yet their impact reaches further than their senses can fathom. As flowering plants seize opportunities across the globe, bees disperse alongside them, colonizing new territories and further shaping how these plants spread. Some bee species become keystone pollinators for entire habitats. Without them, plant reproduction would falter, and the communities dependent on those plants would crumble. Other bees play supporting roles, visiting a broader range of flowers but ensuring continuity within systems where generalist pollinators keep multiple species thriving. Pollination, in essence, becomes a feedback loop. Bees promote plant success. Plants reshape landscapes. Landscapes create niches for more bees. This cycle reinforces itself over millions of years, producing ecosystems that are not merely stable but dynamic, capable of bending without breaking as continents shift, climates fluctuate, and the world evolves. And yet, through all this ecological weight, bees carry on with modesty. They do not celebrate their achievements or seek recognition. They do not boast. Bees never ask for credit. They simply fly, gather, and move through the world with quiet purpose. Small bodies with planetary consequences, shaping life on Earth through the subtle power of persistence. By the time the modern era arrives, a blink compared with the epochs that shaped bees, these small pollinators have become masters of their craft. Every part of their bodies, every rhythm of their seasons, every relationship they maintain with blooming plants, reflects an evolutionary journey filled with refinement. Their history is one of elegance, traits honed by landscapes that moved slowly, climates that shifted broadly, and ecosystems that adapted over spans long enough for life to adjust in peaceful increments. But the world they now inhabit does not move slowly. The climate still shifts, as it always has, but its patterns no longer unfold across deep time. Seasons wobble and twist within a single human lifetime. Rainfall arrives unpredictably. Frost appears out of sequence. Warmth settles in places where cold once ruled. while cold returns to landscapes unprepared for it. These fluctuations do not offer bees the generosity of gradual change. They reconfigure flowering schedules abruptly, forcing bees to navigate a world that no longer respects their internal calendars. For millions of years, a bee emerging in spring could trust that certain flowers would be waiting. Now the dance misaligns. Flowers bloom earlier than expected, spending their nectar before bees awaken. Or they bloom later, opening their petals to skies empty of pollinators. This desynchronization carries a quiet sorrow. Neither the bee nor the flower has done anything wrong, yet both lose the partner they've evolved to rely on. Being excellent at one thing is both a strength and a gamble. Specialist bees, that remarkable lineage of devoted pollinators who built their entire existence around particular flowers, face the steepest cliffs. Their deep evolutionary partnerships, which once offered stability, now expose them to fragility. If a single plant species shifts its timing or distribution, the specialist bee that depends on it may find itself with wings but no destination. Some attempt to adjust, learning the scent or structure of new flowers. Others wait, unable or unwilling to abandon the bloom that shaped their lineage. A few succeed. Many decline quietly. Generalist bees, with broader diets and looser schedules, fare better, at least for now. But even they encounter landscapes transformed by human hands. Fields once brimming with diversified blooms give way to expanses dominated by uniform crops or paved surfaces. The mosaic of wildflower patches that sustained bees through centuries thins into isolated fragments. Bees do not recognize fences or property lines. They follow scent and sunlight. But even so, their flight paths increasingly lead them into barren spaces where no pollen waits. Some bees adapt by shifting their ranges, expanding into regions once too cold or too inhospitable. They follow the warmth northward or upward, tracing new ecological corridors. Yet the speed of climate change means that the plants they depend on may not move at the same pace. A bee might arrive in a new place only to discover that its floral partners have not yet completed their own migration. As always, bees respond with persistence. But persistence sometimes meets boundaries evolution has not had time to soften. Temperature extremes further test their resilience. Heat waves, once rare, now linger for long stretches. Bees experience these conditions as physiological strain, wings that tire faster, bodies that overheat, brood nests that grow too warm to house developing larvae. Social bees that regulate their nest temperature must expend enormous energy to cool or warm their hive. Workers fan tirelessly, vibrating their muscles or gathering water to restore balance. These efforts sustain the colony, but at a cost: less time for foraging, less energy for brood care. Fewer workers raised during the next cycle. In drought years, the scarcity of flowers compounds every challenge. Nectar thins, pollen becomes dusty and sparse, and bees must travel farther to find food. The energy spent flying may outweigh the energy gained. Colonies shrink. Solitary mothers produce fewer offspring. Landscapes that once buzzed with layers of bee activity fall momentarily quiet. predators and parasites, not new but ever present, take advantage of weakened colonies. A stressed bee has little strength to groom away mites or repel invasive insects. Diseases spread faster when food is limited, or when temperature fluctuations compromise immunity. Evolution's long history of bee survival shows countless victories, but in each era, bees faced challenges one at a time. Now, they encounter many simultaneously: heat, scarcity, parasites, and habitat loss layered atop one another. Still, resilience remains woven into their story. Some species alter their activity patterns, foraging earlier in the morning or later in the evening to avoid scorching midday heat. Others adjust their nesting habits, choosing deeper soil layers or shaded structures that buffer temperature swings. Certain bees expand their floral preferences, learning to visit plants they once ignored. Even specialist species show occasional flexibility, experimenting with new blooms when their traditional partners falter. Wild bee communities also engage in quiet ecological negotiations. When one species declines, another may temporarily fill its role, keeping certain plants pollinated and ecosystems afloat. It is an imperfect arrangement, but nature rarely demands perfection, only momentum. Humans, too, become unwitting participants in this chapter. Gardens planted with diverse flowers offer pockets of refuge. Restored prairies and forest edges become corridors connecting bee populations that might otherwise remain isolated. In some places, conservation efforts revive forgotten species, giving them time and space to adapt. While bees never ask for credit, they also never refuse help. Yet the fragility of modern ecosystems remains undeniable. Bees' vulnerabilities do not reflect weakness, but rather the intricate finesse of organisms shaped for worlds that changed slowly. Their specialization, whether in flower preference, nesting habit, or seasonal rhythm, makes them extraordinary. But it also makes them sensitive to disruption. Vulnerability, in this light, becomes a testament, a mark of how deeply bees have integrated with Earth's living fabric. Their survival has always depended on harmony with their environment. And when that harmony trembles, the bees, ever patient, ever persistent, adjust, endure, and continue with quiet determination. The modern world tests them more than any age before. But their story is not one of despair. It is the continuing tale of small bodies navigating massive forces, of ancient rhythms bending but not breaking, of creatures shaped by time who now stand at the edge of a new era, still humming, still working, still searching for blooms that will carry them into the next chapter of Earth's unfolding life. To step back from the vast timeline of bees is to witness a story written not in grand gestures, but in small, steady movements. Unlike creatures that roar or race or carve their presence across continents through sheer force, bees persist through gentler means. They hover, they gather, they navigate by scent and sun. Their bodies weigh almost nothing, yet the path they have traced through time is unmistakably profound. This lineage began with wasps wandering into the promise of sweetness and transformed into an astonishing variety of forms, some social, some solitary, some broad in appetite, others precise in their devotion to a single bloom. Over millions of years, bees have mastered the art of endurance not by dominating landscapes, but by working in harmony with them. They are not heroes or symbols. They are survivors shaped by time, weather, flowers, and chance. When we zoom out, much of what seemed dramatic on the scale of chapters dissolves into subtlety. The ice ages, the droughts, the predators, the migrations. Bees faced these not with frantic reinvention, but with a quiet willingness to adjust. If a flower appeared earlier one year, bees shifted their rhythms. If a nesting site grew unreliable, they dug elsewhere. If landscapes expanded or contracted across epochs, bees rode the slow tides of change without complaint. Bees never rush history. They let it come to them. Across the ages, their persistence reveals an evolutionary truth. Longevity belongs not always to the powerful, but often to the adaptable, the patient, and the small. Species far stronger and more imposing than bees have risen and vanished in the time bees have remained. They have witnessed continents drift apart, oceans reshape coastlines, and forests migrate across hemispheres. Where massive creatures faltered, bees simply continued, unbothered by their own modest scale. Their survival story is inseparable from flowers, yet it is not defined solely by that partnership. Bees have shaped themselves around nectar and pollen, but they have also shaped the world in return, in quiet pulses that ripple outward. They have supported the spread of meadows, the stability of forests, the diversity of grasslands. But bees do not measure importance. They move because the petals call to them, because sunlight warms their wings, because instinct carries them forward. Some bees remain solitary builders of tunneled chambers hidden beneath soil or tucked within reeds. Their lives, brief and self-contained, echo an ancient simplicity untouched by time. Others live within intricate societies, their nests stacked with waxen corridors that hum with collective purpose. These species carry forward the long experiment of cooperation, an experiment that never demanded perfection, only commitment. Together, they form an orbit of diversity that keeps the bee lineage resilient. Bee generations are short, but their story is long. A single spring flight from bloom to bloom may seem fleeting, but multiplied across millions of years and billions of individuals, these small movements become the heartbeat of countless ecosystems. To bee ancestors who first dipped their mandibles into nectar, the world was nothing more than a scattering of petals. To their descendants today, the world remains largely the same. New flowers, new seasons, the same patient work. Even now, as environments change more rapidly than ever before, bees do what they have always done. They adapt when they can, persist when they cannot, and continue working the landscape with instinctive grace. Their vulnerabilities, so evident in modern times, do not diminish their legacy. Instead, they highlight the delicate threads of interdependence that connect all living things, a reminder that no life, no matter how small, stands apart from the world around it. Some bees will thrive in the shifting climates ahead, finding new flowers, new habitats, new rhythms that match their needs. Others may retreat into ecological pockets, surviving quietly, where conditions still resemble the ancient past. A few may vanish, their places in the evolutionary tapestry left open, perhaps someday to be filled by new species following pathways yet unwritten. This is not tragedy. It is the natural ebb and flow of life across deep time. As we close the story, it becomes clear that bees endure not through drama, but through presence. Their persistence is gentle, almost meditative. They are creatures of habit shaped by environments that have never stopped testing them. And while their future will certainly bring challenges, as it always has, their lineage carries a calmness that feels almost ancient in its wisdom. In a world that often celebrates speed, bees remind us of a different truth, that slow, deliberate living can echo across millennia. Their story is a testament to resilience without noise, adaptation without spectacle, survival without conquest. Bees do not race through history. They move through it at the pace of petals opening in the sun. And in doing so, they have written one of the most enduring stories on Earth, a tale of quiet persistence carried forward on gentle wings.